So, as some of you may or may not know, Chen over here, formerly known here in YouTube as the Roaming Millennial, whose channel was terminated today, is in some hot water with the Department of Justice because of allegedly taking some rubles in order to spew hot garbage and help to divide and conquer the American political scene.
It's pretty shocking, and I think this combined with the Russia fake news situation that kind of came to a head last week, I just really don't see how CNN is going to continue like this because you're supposed to report the news if you're a journalist, not make the news because.
Oh boy. That did not age well, huh? It's likely that she had been working for the Russians for many, many years now. Come to think of it, I didn't watch very much of her content. It was difficult. It was impossible to miss because if you were into a certain, well, just politics in general in the West, here in YouTube, she always popped up, right? But listening to her speak now, it really sounds like the type of shit that RT would spew out there, right? The type of shit that Jay Dyer talks about, the type of shit that a lot of these Russian shills talk about, right? They'll present the West as completely corrupt, with intelligence agency tentacles embedded everywhere, in full control, at least of their own sphere, degenerate, and well, fake news, right? Bought and paid for media, corporate media, no integrity, blah, 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 right? And I'm not saying that that's not true necessarily, but they use this tactic to try to paint the other side as somehow holy and religious. Orthodox. So I've been talking about how, in my opinion, a lot of people on social media in YouTube are Russian assets, and a lot of them don't even know it, right? I believe that Tim Pool and Dave Rubin weren't. I think they suspected it. I think that it's pretty safe to assume that they had a pretty good idea that something was up, but it was never communicated to them explicitly that they were taking rubles to spew Russian propaganda in the West, right? They probably suspected it or something along those lines, right? But it's easy to see, and well, we have an example of it, how some people could have plausible deniability or be completely unaware of the fact that they are spewing Russian propaganda, right? Say you got somebody coming on YouTube because they were influenced by one of these Russian assets, perhaps Alex Jones, who I believe is, perhaps Joe Rogan as of late. I think he may be too. Perhaps, I would say the majority of Russian Eastern Orthodox channels here on YouTube are on the payroll, right? But you could see how a disgruntled, angsty teen who's maybe a little bit black pilled when it comes to the West and whatever the fuck, right? Could listen to what some of these guys are saying, just hear something different than what they're used to listening to, hearing, and mistake that for being somehow true, right? Just it's a common fallacy, right? Just because the people that you've been listening to. Just because one side is full of shit, it doesn't mean that somebody who opposes them is true, right? That's not how this shit works. But a lot of people fall for this, right? They'll tell you, oh, you know, my channel is sanctioned or shadow banned, blah, 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 because the powers that be don't want you to hear what I have to say because it's all true, right? Uh, that's stupid. But anyway, I could see how someone like that, maybe Lauren Chen, was influenced by some of these Russian assets and started spewing a narrative that, RT or any of these Russian intelligence agencies, news media liked and wanted to help promote, right? So she was contacted directly, at least according to the indictment, and she knew what she was doing, right? That's why her channel disappeared, and she's more than likely fucked. Um, you know, hey, maybe some of these people knew that this sort of thing happened, and they were just basically pitching their talents to the other side, right? They wanted that money. Anyway, yeah, you could see how Russian intelligence or Russian media would find someone like her agreeable, able to be used, whether directly and explicitly with their own knowledge, or perhaps as a useful idiot like Tim Pool, or by whatever means, right? And even if you have a tiny channel, right? A small channel, let's say all of a sudden you get a donor to your Patreon or a Cash App or whatever, and after you make a certain video, they send you $100 and say, "Oh, I really like that video," right? And you make another video kind of in that same vein because, hey, it's $100, and bam, you get $200, and then another video, maybe $300, another video, you're up to five, and then maybe some more communications like, "I really like that video and what you had to say about this, and that, but I'm not too sure I agree with this other thing you believe in. I actually think that this is a better way of seeing this problem. This is what's actually going on, right?" So by the time you make the sixth video for $600, you find yourself, well, saying what that person essentially told you to say, right? You have no clue who they are, where the money's coming from. I mean, it has a dollar sign attached to it, right? It couldn't be rubles, could be, right? So even small channels with a few hundred subscribers, even, yeah, I'm not fucking around, could very well be Russian assets. I mean, these people pay, you know, pennies to these Russian trolls to just comment all over videos and just bombard, just do what it is that they do. You know what they do. You see them everywhere. These Russian bots, right? There's probably tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of them. Maybe not that many. It does. The more somebody does for you, the more you pay them, right? But that doesn't mean that you wouldn't hire, little foot soldiers that are just slinging dime bags too, right? You, if you got the money, and there's plenty of money in Russia, you know, you'll buy any and everybody you can. If they have a small reach, well, the price is small. If they have a huge reach, you gotta pay them a lot more. But at the end of the day, if your budget is 10 billion, that's exactly what you're going to try to spend on any and everybody you can, right? So I believe this is just the tip of the iceberg, and in many instances, it's not even worth going after people that are small enough. And maybe some of the bigger people, like say Alex Jones, allegedly, my opinion, the paper trail is a lot more secretive, harder to find, difficult to follow, right? They've taken the measures necessary to protect themselves a lot better. So, it's, I really think this is just one roach, and behind the wall there's hundreds. I always believed this to be true, and this is proof positive, right? This is Russian collusion, whatever the hell you want to call it, Russian influence, Russia meddling in U.S. elections. And if you think that was always bullshit, well, you've been brainwashed by Russian propaganda. All you got to do is read Mueller, was it, report, and you'll see that it wasn't bullshit. Russia, USSR, whatever you want to call it, has been influencing U.S. politics for what, 100 years now? A very, very long time. So it it's really easy. I gave you an example of an obvious Russian show. Now, I'm not saying the guy is already on the payroll, but he's really trying to be, right? But I mean, looking at how Sebastian's channel just blew up, and looking at the types of comments that he gets and the types of views that he gets, his engagement, none of that looks organic. And the types of things that he says, right? This is the biggest tell. It's just stupid, right? You have all these people out there who you may have thought they are intelligent, right? They come across intelligent, and they're very, very smart people, and they say some asinine shit. They'll tell you that contradicting yourself or being incoherent is, a no-no, and then they'll just go right the fuck ahead and do it, right? Because it's, again, this fallacy, this idea that if I point out what's wrong with everybody else, right, I could point out all these faults in everybody, that makes me infallible in the eyes of many, right? I'll just be pointing fingers in every direction, telling you to look there, except here, right? And I think a lot of people are gullible enough to fall for that. But if they were to take some of the standards that these people put onto other people, just as Lauren Chen just did here, right, and they applied that same type of scrutiny on the person pointing the finger, um, they might wake the fuck up and realize that they're being duped and lied to. And I think there's lots and lots and lots of Russian assets out there. And it's interesting how you have some more of this so-called right-wing media, right? They're all leftists. I'm gonna keep saying that because it's true. Saying that, oh, now the other side is gonna use this to point out how this is just the tip of the iceberg and how all these other people are suspect or they're Russian assets and blah 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 blah, right? Why so defensive, guys? Because it's true. Of course it is. So, yeah, people who are obviously intelligent and are very, very good at pointing out fallacies and showing you, teaching you how to find truth, how to recognize what's true, right? All of a sudden, don't live by that standard, the standard of truth, right? And just spew pure, unadulterated bullshit, thinking they have this Superman cape on them that's going to protect them from scrutiny, because, well, in most cases it does. These Russian, just going to give you some examples, right, of how to pick up on who these people are. I mean, obviously, Jackson, Shinko, Henko, whatever the fuck his name is, that's obviously another guy that's on the payroll or trying to be, right? Guys like that. I mean, it's so obvious who they are. Scott Ritter, whose house was recently raided by the FBI, right? Um, this guy, what's his name? Hassan. I've seen him in a couple of debates. I mean, he came across as a right winger, but now he's a full on communist. You know, I don't know if he ever really was right or claimed to be right wing, and now is just admitting that he's really a leftist. But I mean, he always was a leftist, in my view. I mean, obviously, he always was a leftist. He's just now realizing his true identity if he didn't before, right? Or maybe he was a little bit shy, not trying to come out the closet. Um, I'm gonna go on a bit of a tangent here, make a prediction. Guys like that, right? The commies, they're going to align themselves with the ortho bros, and they're gonna unite and move toward a common goal, even though they're supposed to be different, right? USSR and Russia, they're not the same thing. It's all going to merge eventually, and you're going to see true colors, true faces, and they're going to become allies in the struggle, right? The struggle to take away your rights and make freedom a filthy word, right? Basically. Um, but yeah, these people, going back to what I was saying a second ago, these people who are obviously intelligent and have taught you how to recognize what's true, um, or maybe they didn't. They showed you that they could get to the truth, but for whatever reason, a lot of people that listen to them have not taken the tools that they provided you with to, didn't use those tools to scrutinize the source, right? Um, Clearly, those people don't. It's easy to tell that there's a high probability that they're Russian assets, whether they know it or not is irrelevant. I mean, come on, man. If you're interviewing the head of the State Duma in Russia, you have a esoteric, whatever the fuck, pagan, esoteric, sinful show on a TV network, Gaia, that's like this new agey Russian fucking network. Um, you know, you work with Oliver Stone's kid, who the dad, right, got to interview Putin, and out of like Western journalist, if you will, whatever the fuck, right? He's probably like one of 5 people who ever got to sit down face to face with Putin and interview him in his decades long career as a politician, right? Once he became, the evil Putin, um, once he showed his true colors, I mean, people like that aren't just, you don't just tweet fucking Alexander Dugin and get him on your show. You know what I mean? That just doesn't happen like that. You're not 1 or 2 steps removed from the so-called president of Russia by chance or by mistake. It's just, come on, man, don't be fucking stupid, right? Um, these people who spew this absolute nonsense propaganda, either they're simply the victims thereof, unable to think for themselves, right? But this obviously doesn't apply to the intelligent ones, to the smart ones. Or they're on the Russian payroll, or they're trying to be. Maybe there's some other options, but I don't see how there could be, right? So, for example, right, people who tell you that NATO started this war or provoked this war, right? Absolutely fucking asinine. It doesn't make any sense. I've made countless videos debunking that stupid narrative, right? Anybody who tells you that, suspect. It's just it just doesn't make any sense on any level. It's stupid. Okay? It's asinine. You can't bitch and moan about international agreements and how Ukraine has violated them, right? Showing that you respect, that you think international law should be respected, right? And that makes Ukraine the bad guy, and then completely ignore all the agreements that USSR and Russia signed that are international law that they have since violated, right? And you can't compare Ukraine potentially, right? No proof for it, violating being the first one to violate the Minsk Accords, right? You can't compare that to a verbal quip, a quote unquote promise that somebody who's today fucking irrelevant made to Russia, saying that NATO is not going to expand, right? Like, oh, okay. Do you have anything on paper that says what? What international law did NATO violate by expanding? Which one? None of them, right? And obviously, we have a rule, however corrupt it is, however problematic it is. I get it, right? However, U.S. gets to violate, or some other actor gets to violate some of these agreements they themselves have um, signed, perhaps, right? That doesn't erase the fact that we have a certain rule based order that's Western dominated in the world. And Russia is challenging that, right? That's the new world order. And completely and utterly being a rogue state that doesn't respect any of these old agreements, laws, things that they agreed to respect. Their signatures on pieces of paper, right? All of that is being undermined right now and destroyed. Right? You can't hold Russia as some kind of a virtuous agent who lives up to these agreements, and it's the West violating their verbal quips from nobody that's fucking relevant today as somehow a violation of some kind of a fucking law, and that meaning that the West is to blame for this conflict here today. That doesn't make any fucking sense. It's absolutely retarded. So anybody who spews this garbage is an absolute Russian shill. One of the three, definitely one of the three I pointed out. Right? You can't talk about Russia having some kind of moral justification to attack Ukraine because NATO is expanding and threatening them. It was going to attack them any moment now, right? I mean, if NATO ever had a reason, and I'm not saying they do, but if there ever was anything close to a reason to attack Russia, that would be right now, right? Russian missiles have flown into NATO, have killed NATO members. I mean, Russia is waging hybrid warfare against NATO countries, right? If Russia is weak right now, Russia can barely handle Ukraine themselves, right? If NATO really wanted to attack Russia and was really being militarily a threat to Russia, why wouldn't they step in right now and just finish them off? Right? Doesn't make any fucking sense. It's retarded. You're stupid if you believe this shit. You're absolutely stupid. And then you have things such as, you know, Putin wanted to push NATO back, but all he did was just extend his border with NATO and forced all these other countries to join up with NATO, which was so fucking predictable that it was going to happen once Russia started, you know, a major war in Europe. Right? It doesn't make any fucking sense to act like Russia is doing the right thing because NATO, right? Because obviously it was going to, and it did, it was going to strengthen NATO. NATO was basically fucking brain dead, wasn't it? Trump who said that, right? NATO was weak. It still is pretty weak, right? NATO's basically been disarmed. The U.S. has been complaining about European members of NATO about not pulling their weight, not investing enough in military, in their defense budget, right? And these things that's changing right now, right? If Putin did anything, is reinvigorate and well, he has given NATO a reason to fucking exist. NATO was falling apart because it didn't see Russia as a threat. That's why NATO came into existence in the first place. So obviously NATO was going to be reinvigorated once the original reason why NATO came into existence in the first place, to be fucking redundant so this shit sinks in, was rogue Russia or USSR. And the more it appeared, or maybe they ignored Russia's aggression, didn't think that Russia was going to do what they did in Ukraine anyway, right? The less of a threat Russia was perceived, the less of a need there was for NATO. So Russia, right, being a rogue state once again, which was the fucking reason why NATO came into existence in the first fucking place, was obviously going to strengthen and lead to unification and buildup of military might on NATO's side. Duh. So none of these fucking Russian narratives make any fucking sense. It's absolutely retarded. It's fake news, 300%, 12 days a week. It's You got to be straight up fucking retarded to fall for this bullshit, right? And just because people who have told you the truth up until this point and were very good at it are saying this shit, they don't create truth. Truth is what it is, right? God, not those fucking jokers. I'm out of here.